Welcome back to the Blue Collar Trade Show, where real people share real stories about building, fixing, leading, and living with purpose. I'm Troy, and I'm here with the crew, Chad, Jim, Marissa. Each week we dig into lessons, have laughs, and hard-won wisdom from the folks who keep America running. Let's get into it. All right, everybody, welcome to the Blue Collar Trade Show. Yay, we've got Mr. Chris Buttenham from REINS with us today. I got to tell you, Chris, looking at some of your background and some of the different things you're doing, it's awesome. And it's something I'm not familiar with. So I'm excited to learn. I'm familiar with it, but not in a very in-depth way, which I'm sure you talk to a lot of people about. But I'm super excited to see what this could do. And I think our listeners, I don't know, Jim, we're up to 1.8 or 1.9 million listeners.
1.9.
If your inbox doesn't get filled up by the end of the day, Chris, you call Jim, okay?
Yeah, we're up to 1.9. Chris, by this evening, we hope to have 2 viewers.
There you go.
1.9.
Not 2. Yeah. All right, Chris. Okay, so let's start off like this. So like I said, we keep this pretty loose and fun. So let's have a conversation. But so tell us about you, right? So, how'd you get into, where did you, well, let's start here. Where were you from? How'd you get into some of this?
Yeah, I'm from a really small town in Southern Ontario up in Canada.
Okay.
And kind of
That's where
grew up
Jim's
blue collar. That's where Jim's from? Oh, okay.
He's from.
Were you?
I couldn't get
I am
further
kidding.
away. I'm from farther away from Ontario than I'm from Arizona. So
That's not true. Well, I thought you were born in Michigan. That's
I was
southern.
born in the
That's
UP
Southern
of
Ontario.
Michigan. Right. Well, that's kind of
Pretty close.
enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not too far
Canadians-
from where I'm from.
There you go. All right. Sorry.
Very good. Yeah, my dad worked on the locks at Sault Ste. Marie. So
Okay. Yeah. Well, when I worked for my dad growing up, he had a company, a security company that we had service contracts with grocery retailers all over Ontario. And so I was on the trucks with him for about 5 years, and I would drive, all over the province, Sault Ste. Marie being one of those places.
See, I knew there'd be a connection there somewhere.
there's always a connection.
Yep.
Like
Jim is a Navy guy, but he's been in just about every town in the U.S. So I always make.
There you go. There you go.
Okay, so that's where you were born, and all right. So what happened? What happened next?
Yeah. So, small town kid. I went to college in a little bit bigger of a town, about 30 minutes north of town I grew up in. I flunked out of business school, got a degree in basket weaving or as close to it.
Wait a second. So
as
you
can
don't
get.
just flunk out. So either you don't go, or did you go to all your classes and just fail, or did you get really good at college? And
I I failed math, and at the time they were kicking people out for that. So I got kicked out of business school and got a degree in sociology.
there you go. Nice.
Yeah,
There's not enough
yeah.
sociologists in the world.
That's exactly that's what I say. That's what I say. So, and actually, part of the reason I don't think I was a great student is I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. So I was always tinkering around with things. And I started my first company when I was 15. I was kind of doing like digital marketing. And so like all through university, I was kind of building brands and websites and doing all kind of marketing stuff for other small entrepreneurs in the area. But then I started my first real business in 2015, kind of coming out of college. I started a software company, kind of bit the Silicon Valley bug, really wanted to build a startup. And that was a long, windy road. Ended up being a 7-year journey that ended in us selling the business in 2021 successfully, but not without a ton of hurdles along the way.
Sure.
And then after that was when I started REINS, the current company.
Okay. It's interesting. So when you talk to entrepreneurs, do you think it's either you are or you're not? Why do you think that?
Yes, I have an extremely strong kind of bullheaded opinion on this.
Let's
I
hear it.
like because I don't have any other skills. Like, I don't like I am incapable of actually working for anyone. I've proven that a couple of times in my life, and I think yeah,
Or
you're
learning
kind of
math.
born with it. Yeah, or learning math. I mean, because calculus has really come in so handy in my entrepreneurial
I had
career.
to keep my
You
way
know,
through
when
calculus too.
you're under the hood of that car, and boy, that calculus just
Yeah, 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 yeah.
kicks right in.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, I think it can't be taught. I think people have an um, innate thing in them that makes them an entrepreneur, and you certainly. I wasn't a good entrepreneur when I started, so you certainly learn things and you get wiser, and you become who you ultimately will be. But I don't think it can be taught actually. And I think there's a lot of people that play entrepreneur, and there was definitely a moment when I was growing up where they kind of glorified it, which is I think a real disservice to like business and entrepreneurship broadly, because it's not a great career path. You're not going to make more money doing it. You're not going to have more free time. You're probably going to lose friends. You're going to piss off your family. So, yeah, I've got strong opinions on
Great
this.
sales pitch. You should be on the
Yeah,
Shark Tank.
exactly.
Man,
Yeah,
should be your
exactly.
next. That should be your next company.
You and
That's right.
Mr. Wonderful. He's
That's right.
Canadian too, right?
Yes,
He's
he
not.
is. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Um, okay, but I agree, right? So there's a lot of people that, so being in franchising for a long time, that's kind of the precipice for many people that are thinking about being an entrepreneur this is a business in a box, right? And it is, right? People that actually take that leap of faith, it's a pretty big
yeah,
deal, right? And
yeah.
it takes some balls, right? But most people, Jim, I mean, you probably talked to 10,000 potential entrepreneurs, and what, 1% of them actually go through it because the risk tolerance isn't there. It's
Right.
just,
And what's funny is a lot of times when you're talking to people, they think that it's going to be so much easier. If I'm in charge, it's going to be so much easier, and they don't realize the work and the effort and the cost of
well,
being in business.
yeah, you said it. It's like, okay, you're going to work twice as much and make no money. Who wants
Yep,
that? Right.
Right.
yep.
Yeah. So, all right, but you did it and you have it in you. And I'm the same way. It's like I've had jobs. And I've been okay at sales. I don't have any real skills, right? Outside of um, sarcasm and a little wit, I guess. But that's about it.
Very
But
little. Very little.
very little. Yeah. But I'm not afraid to try things, right? So that's the key. So it sounds like that's how you grew up as well. You have to watch our
Exactly.
very first show on here. So I tell the story of my very first business when I was 10. So I think you'll get a kick out of it.
Yeah, I'd like that. Yeah.
All right. So that is, you got the entrepreneurial bug, you're born with it. Anybody else in your family an entrepreneur? Did you see it around you?
My old man, yeah. So his business,
My old
growing
man,
up,
I like
obviously,
it. You don't hear that a
yeah.
lot. God, my old man. Yeah.
He heard me say that once, and he was all offended. And I grew up him picking on me every day, and I was like, I thought it was endearing, but now that I know he doesn't like it, I keep saying it.
It's, it's because you're pointing out the obvious, right? So
Yeah,
I have
yeah,
three
yeah, yeah.
sons. And if they said it, it's like, if someone else says it to their dad, not a big deal. Like you just said, if somebody said it, if one of them said it to me, not sure. I'm still feeling a little, you're touching on a sore,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah,
on a touchy subject here.
yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. So his business, I grew up watching him. He was actually a military police officer, and then got into the security industry as a private investigator. He bought one camera to help with his private investigations, and then that flourished into what was a 30-year career in the CCTV security industry.
Really? So he
Yeah,
did
and
stakeouts and stuff? That's kind of cool.
I think he did, like when he was really really young, like that kind of thing, and yeah, yeah.
Okay. So there you go. So you saw it in action, which is pretty cool. All right. So let's just jump into the REINS thing. So tell us what, did you wake up one day? Did you go on a long walk on a beach, or how did this is a big shift, right? So
Yeah, definitely. So my last company was It was a productivity app, like true software company selling to large enterprises. And I had been thinking about the silver tsunami, sort of like the changing of guard of baby boomers who own most of the business assets in this country, for quite a while I was still working on my last company, and thinking about, wow, what a sort of big challenge, what a big opportunity that would be, for a bunch of entrepreneurs kind of wedging themselves into that. And when I sold my business, a few things
I
happened.
have to interrupt for a second. I love the
Yeah,
term
please, Jim.
silver tsunami. That's awesome.
Hmm.
I'd never heard that.
Yeah, goes
Did you
well
make
with
that
old
up?
man, doesn't it? No,
Yeah.
no.
Oh, Silver
Yeah,
Tsunami.
look, yeah.
One of us on this show is not a boomer. Just
I'm not gonna call it out.
okay. All right. Fair enough. Okay. So you
Um,
recognize something was happening, right? This
yeah,
whole, yeah, money,
yeah,
all that.
over $1 trillion worth of business assets changing hands over the next decade. Um, not just the boomers, quite frankly. But so I recognize this issue, and a few things happened when I sold my last company. One, I saw how difficult it was to sell a company. It was actually the hardest thing in the 7-year journey. And had no, uh, did not anticipate that at all. You think about selling a company, you think that's like the gold at the end of the rainbow. You think it's that's not the hard part. It was extremely difficult. Um, and then I also, kind of reflected on that journey, and through being a purebred entrepreneur, I didn't want to sell software to software companies anymore. It just felt like not fulfilling, not really adding a ton of value. And so I really got excited about helping the real economy, and the millions of small business owners out there in this country that historically, have been forgotten or at least underserved, because it's kind of hard to sell to them. It's a completely different ball game. What I did was I just started interviewing small business owners on what their challenges were. And like, I had a bias. I saw this opportunity of, look, a lot of these guys are going to need to sell their business. So kind of asking questions in and around that area. And what became really apparent is most business owners aren't really planning for succession. They're just not like thinking that proactively. They're thinking about what's in front of them in a very honest way, right? Like, they have to solve the problems that are in front of them, and the
Because they're
problems
putting out
that
fires
kept
all
coming.
the time, right? And they're paying
Exactly.
payroll and just whatever. They're the CEO of the chief everything officers, right? So yeah.
Exactly. And so one of those fires that we kept hearing was people, retaining them, placing them, right? Like, it was all about people. And those folks, what we learned is there's kind of this direct correlation between the key people in a business and those owners' ability to exit one day, or in the near term, even just take a foot out of the day-to-day grind. And so that was kind of the inspiration, that kind of started us on this path of creating tools that allow these owners to incentivize their key employees that historically they didn't have access to. Historically, these tools were only available to big corporations, private equity, of course, venture capital, which was another thing that I learned. And in the startup world, was having access to these incentive tools, for key employee retention.
And expensive attorneys.
Yeah. I mean, I learned that this type of thing really can only be done through a fancy compensation and benefits attorney that I didn't even know existed before I started this business. So if you think about that and the lack of access that the average independent business owner has to the specialized help, it's a non-starter for
Yeah.
most folks.
It's too much. And they're just like, okay, whatever. I'm just gonna
Yeah,
hope for the
exactly.
best. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Most people we talked to, I was surprised to learn that they had thought about equity or giving some skin in the game, some sharing some upside with their key team, and they just didn't know where to begin. They had heard of things like phantom stock or alternative equity, but that was as far as it went typically. And so we really just started with first principles. Well, could we do this? Could we do this for a handful of our, friends of friends who had auto shops and HVAC companies? Could we help them give their GM a little bit of a slice of the action? And that's kind of how it began.
It's interesting. I think it's also interesting how you failed in math and now you started basically a fancy financial company.
Yeah,
How
that's
do you,
actually that is ironic.
Yeah. Yeah.
but I can
He's
assure you,
helping
I
others.
I don't know your business that well, but I can almost guarantee there's no
Uh,
calculus involved in this program. So you're
No
not somebody.
calculus.
Oh,
No
I
calculus.
like it's people going around the moon. They use it a lot. Everyone else, not sure.
Not so much.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So what do you think? All right. So you made your first. So talk about that, right? So you made. What's the first thing an entrepreneur does? Make a logo, right? Let's start with that, right? So,
For sure.
but all right. So you had to have approached somebody, and they said I need something. So how did the first one happen? Because
Yeah.
was it a first deal and then it happened, or did you have the idea and then you go out and just start pitching the deal?
Yeah, you know what? I the idea has evolved for sure, but it's closer to where it began than I could have ever imagined. So we kind of did have the idea, but what happened was, a friend of a friend actually has an auto shop here in Las Vegas. So Jim, we're neighbors and both very far from where we grew up. And the auto shop has he's an older owner, and the GM was a younger dude, and he wanted eventually for the GM to take over the business. But in the interim, like, he kind of had a back of the napkin promise to give this individual some part of the business. And he started explaining it to me. He said, I kind of looked into it a little bit. I talked to my, local strip mall attorney, and they said, well, there's going to be some tax implications to
Yes.
this. The costs of actually drafting this are going to be quite substantial. And I was like, well, just hang on a second. Let me see if I can figure that out for you. And that's how it started. So we kind of considered them a pilot. And what we did is we found the true story is we found a compensation and benefits attorney on
The true
Reddit.
story. Okay, good.
Yeah, well, a lot of people don't tell their true story. So we found this phantom stock attorney on Reddit, and we bought his kind of like source phantom stock document for him, and we basically helped this business owner set it up and give it to his GM. And so we started very, very analog. Like, first of all, what is this thing? Like, can you give equity without creating a tax event for the employee and without giving up sort of the control aspect that most owners don't want to give up? And that's where we actually stumbled upon this idea of alternative equity and these, kind of obscure, non-qualified deferred compensation structures that have been around forever but never really used and made accessible to the masses.
Interesting. Okay, so all right, so that's where it started. And you're like, all right, so you put a deal together for them, and you're like, I think we're onto something here. And was it?
That's easy.
And then you just kind of referrals and just started building it from there.
Not at all. So we put up a landing page on our website,
That's when you made the
and
website. I was gonna say
yeah, we
logo
made the
website. Now
website.
we have it. Right there you go.
Yeah. And then what we did was we took the Phantom Stock agreement that we bought and we gave it away for free. And we ran ads against it. So anyone searching for Phantom Stock on Google landed on this landing page, and then they could get a sample of the Phantom Stock agreement for free, and thousands of people download. And so I would send them an email, and they started replying. And that's how we got our first, 20, 30 customers, um, with the hope that we would find sort of a recurring value around it. So really, I was a document salesman for about 6 months to a year.
Yeah.
And then what we learned was, well, there's some compliance to this. There is an administrative angle to this. What if I want to give it to not just one person, but I want to give it to 5 people? By the way, how did we make this real for the employees? Historically, they just get this piece of paper, kind of gets filed away in a filing cabinet. You never think about it again. So then we build an employee app. They can look at it the phone. Well, now we got to value the business so they know what it's worth. And all these components sort of started to come together just through first principles. And that's some of the challenge of because doing something that really truly hasn't been done before. You know how it's done in a legacy service provider way, but we wanted to build it in a sort of modern technology forward way.
Okay, so what is so you have a partner or do you have a team? What does that look like? What's your team look like today?
Yeah, so my co-founder in this business, my business partner, him and I started the last company together. So we've been working together for about 12 years. Fortunate to have that relationship. And we're a team
Is
of,
he good at math?
he actually has a degree in mathematics and astrophysics.
There you
So,
go.
Wow,
There
there
you
you
go.
go.
The yin and yang. There you go.
yeah,
Man,
yeah, yeah. Correct. Correct. We find our opposites, don't we?
There we go.
So yeah, him and I, co-founders, and then we're a team of 10 today. But we do have investors as well.
Okay, very good. All right, so you kind of live in your own sales process to a certain extent, right? So do you well, investors is different, but the with your okay, so let's talk about this, right? So if I have questions here, but so at a high level, so give us the different. You said two things: phantom stock and alternate equity, right? Explain
the
what
difference.
what those are, what the
Yeah.
differences are.
Yeah. So alternative equity is just a category of incentives typically designed for the average independent business owner to share upside, share equity without giving up any control. And so underneath alternative equity, you've got phantom stock, profit sharing, and performance bonuses. So on one end, phantom stock is also known as phantom equity, ghost stock, appreciation rights. This is a non-qualified deferred compensation plan. In plain English, it's a contract that that pays employees a bonus in the future if an event happens, and it's usually tied to the value of the company. Usually, you give, let's say, your right hand 10% in phantom stock, and when the business sells, they get basically 10% of the net proceeds from the sale. That'd be the simplest way
Sure.
to set
Yep.
it up and structure it. Plenty of complexity underneath if you want to do it that way. Um, that is a long-term incentive designed for retention, often has golden handcuffs at the finish line where employees don't get paid everything at the sale. There's some held back, assuming they stick around post-sale. Um, that obviously doesn't give a lot of feedback or opportunity for uh, earning along the way. So that's often why something like a profit share is layered on top. And it's kind of considered a midterm incentive where, say, on a quarterly basis or an annual basis, employees can self fund a share of the profits in the form of a bonus. So we set a company goal. It's usually called a trigger, say 10% net profits. And if we exceed that, employees start self funding their own bonus pool effectively. And then if that's typically sort of a high level company goal, anything else kind of fits under the performance bonus bucket, which can be more frequent and more tied towards some individual's contribution ultimately to the business. And so the combination of these things create retention, they create proper alignment with the growth of the business, and ultimately can be a tool that helps business owners plan for succession. And succession can mean a bunch of things. It can mean I want to sell my business outright, or it can mean I just want to start, playing golf with my son on, Tuesdays.
So how is it different than what's it? I was looking for the acronym where it's
ESOP,
almost yeah. There you
the
go.
ESOPs.
ESOPs, yeah. So ESOPs are like on the complete other end of the complexity structure. So ESOPs, employee stock ownership plans, are qualified retirement plans. And basically, they're like a glorified 401k where the business actually sells to the employees through this retirement vehicle. The difference is far more complex. It's very, very costly and complicated to set up and maintain to remain compliant because it is a qualified plan. And there's lots of benefits to it, but if we're being honest, I think a lot of people say it's about the employees when in reality, it's about the tax benefit the owner gets when selling to the ESOP. And there's nothing wrong with that, but people like to market it as an employee incentive, employee retention tool. And it's really not. Employees don't even get paid if the business sells externally. They only get paid upon retirement. So it's very similar to a 401k.
Gotcha. Okay, interesting. All right, so so some of the things that a business would be asking. All right, so most of them, if they're thinking about this, they haven't had an official valuation of their business, right? So how do you go about that? Is that a big formal? That's where your math guy comes in to a certain extent, right? So
It actually
is
is,
that
yeah.
is that something that's like hyper realistic, or is it like, well, this is what I think it's worth, and or a little bit of both?
That's a really good question. So short answer is we do the valuation. You can also use a third party partner that we work with, and not all plans require it, but we always recommend it to make it feel real for the
Feel real,
employees.
right?
In some scenarios, though, you need it because you may only be sharing the appreciation in value, and so you need to understand what it's worth today, so that you know the delta between today and when the eventual trigger happens. Um, it is formal in the sense that it's designed to be defensible. So really you just need it. You need to be able to point to someone or something where they have a really defensible method evaluation so they can say, well, here's how we came up with it. And the IRS makes it very clear about what's defensible and what's not. So
Mm.
that's how
Or
we do it.
So
Yeah.
do you have like a niche, right? So is it because there's SaaS companies that have crazy valuations, and then there's regular home service businesses
hmm
that are a little bit
hmm
more typical, built on kind of multiples of profit or different things like that. So you watch Shark Tank for 5 minutes, you would never figure out how in the world they come to those valuations, but
Yeah.
how do you all what's the normal what's those 2 questions there. So who is your customer typically? And how do you what at a high level, how do you kinda give a if somebody says, "Where am I at?" Right? What would you say?
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's a good point, right? A business is only worth what someone's willing to pay for it, which is why I say when you're valuing it for the purpose of equity or compensation, you really are trying to just come up with the best guess in a defensible way. And we work with contractors mostly, so residential services, a little bit of commercial
Our world.
construction.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. And the way it's actually quite complicated because our valuation is very robust. Some people will do kind of what they call a broker opinion of value, multiple of EBITDA. What we do is it's a very robust report. It's often 20 to 30 pages long. And we basically take a few different approaches. So we'll take an income approach based on a DCF. We'll do an asset approach, which is as it sounds, and a market approach where we'll look at comps. There's a bunch of math actually
Yeah. Yeah.
with each of them. And then we weight them depending on the stature of the business. Sometimes the asset approach is worth 0% because they're in the red. Sometimes it's all about forward-looking growth of the business because of something that the business owners told us, and then sometimes it's
Blue
just
sky
about the
stuff,
comps.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So we take all those approaches, put them into one, and show the owner and create a report that they can point to when they obviously when they grant those incentives.
How often when you share that report, do they give you the finger, or they go, "You're crazy"?
So people either really care or don't care at all. It's a very emotional exercise for them.
Yeah, yeah. That's okay. So that's that's kind of where it starts a little bit, and then
Yeah.
so the same thing. So I'll get to the why, but the what and the how is, all right. So we got a business that's worth X, right? And we'll talk about the why, like I said, but so okay, so what, right? So as an entrepreneur, you're like, I don't want to give. everybody something because I don't know who's going to stay here. I don't know who's worth what. I don't, I don't want to give up. So the control component, just almost the carrot. There's a carrot, but is it, well, what's the percentage that you advise, right? For something
Yeah.
like this
Yeah. Great question.
without going, I gave away 25% of my company and what for, right?
For what?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, good question. So another one of the big differences between an ESOP and say a non-qualified plan like alternative equity is you don't legally have to give it to or offer it to everyone, whereas an ESOP you do. Same with a 401k, right? So you can pick and choose as long as you don't discriminate for anything under, does it Title VII? Like
Something
race,
like that. So
gender,
I
creed.
can't, just because Jim's, a
Well,
boomer.
yeah, and the age discrimination I get a
Yeah,
lot,
yeah, 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 yeah.
but I'm used
So
to it. I'm used
yeah,
to
so
it
be
now.
careful with that, boys.
Right.
That one is that one's tough. But other than that, you can say, well, this person is a manager. This person's been with me for 10 years. They deserve more. So you can do that. The way we come up with that, and one of the reasons why this business reigns probably wouldn't have been possible 5 years ago is technology and quite frankly artificial intelligence makes it possible. So because we've done hundreds of these employee incentives, we can now benchmark what people do based on what others like them have done and have been successful with. So usually we use data. It is a subjective exercise, of course, but we can say, well, on average a business of your size will set aside about 15% of the fair market value of the business. And if you're granting an award to, let's say, a general manager, well, that award's going to fit on average around 2.5% for the full award value. And you're going to vest that over 4 years. And if they leave, they're probably going to forfeit that award unless you have, a special arrangement with this individual
If
where
they
they
leave,
should get paid. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Um, so that's typically, it's an exercise we go through, and there's a bit of future planning where we say if you're comfortable, if you want to exit at this price and you're comfortable giving away this much, well, we can back into the reality of what you should set aside today and what you should leave room for as you grow into that valuation.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, right? So if you think, all right, so here's a percentage, GM gets this, other people get that, and then all of a sudden everybody gets 0.2%. Does that move the needle enough? I don't know, right? So um that's the
That's a good
question.
question. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is something that I think doesn't get enough credence. So a friend of mine, Tony Cooper, he's a contractor out in Bainbridge, Georgia, and forgive me for anyone who's heard this story, but he's a perfect one where he had a GM that he was hiring who had an expectation of equity, and so he knew he had to kind of do something for him, but he never anticipated doing anything for anyone else. And when I showed him how easy it was and how much a small amount can move the needle, he ended up doing it for, I think, north of a dozen people. And he's sort of famous in the REINS world for giving just a quarter of a point, because what does that equate to in dollars when you've got a business worth over $10 million? It's actually really meaningful, particularly for maybe just your run of the mill but very important office staff who wouldn't otherwise get this type of variable compensation. They've never seen a 5-figure bonus in their life. And so to track that and to show them if we win, you win, it's the answering the what's in it for me question. So to answer your question, Troy, yeah, a small amount goes a long way, and it's not necessarily a small amount.
Yeah. It
Well, and
doesn't
it's
have to be.
also it's huge for building the loyalty. You're not
Yes.
gonna get people leaving to jump ship for $1 an hour if they know that they have this down the pipe. Yeah.
That's right.
Can they say it's employee? How do you bring that? Well, it's not, because it's not employee owned, right? So is there some terms that business owners use to get?
That's a good question. We haven't cracked that code, honestly. There are a lot of people in the I want to be employee owned camp that end up finding us because they don't know what they don't know about ESOPs, and they kind of go down that world, and they're like, "Ooh, this is
What I
not
thought.
not what I thought it was going to be." Um, I would just say it's a vehicle to share upside and real skin in the game with the people that help build your business from day one,
I think you should come up with a real catchy name, and you could say it here first. And one point, what? Yeah, a lot of people will by tomorrow
A lot.
will be repeating that word.
Well, honestly, admittedly, we created the term alternative equity because really the term that the incentives are typically go by is phantom stock, and it's just a terrible name for a really great benefit. So we coined the term alternative equity, and we're trying to popularize it.
There you go.
But the verb, I don't know what the verb is.
Jim, you think of it, and then he'll give you
All
some.
tech.
Yeah. All right. So the other question that business owners come up to, so not only how much do I give, and so then is what if? So obviously, if I give something to someone and they quit, all right, well then they're walking away, and that bunch goes back into the pool, right? So essentially, right?
That's typically how it's set up. And that doesn't
And then,
have to be, but that's typically how it's set up.
but if they get let go, right? How is that typically handled? So is it written in there that as long as it's for cause, that you're not qualifying for this anymore? Does that get people into trouble? Because you can say, you just pissed me off and I'm taking this and that, both, right?
So
Because with right to work states, you don't have to have a lot of reasons to let people go sometimes, right?
So I have to say I'm not an attorney and it's not legal advice.
Wow.
But,
Yeah. So he's not a
Noted.
mathematician. He's
Noted.
not an attorney.
Yeah,
what
are
am
you?
I?
What's that?
What am I? So it's basically governed by contract law. So you don't typically, it's not designed such that you get into sort of trouble on the employment side. And as long as the employee agrees to the contract up front, that is the terms. The short answer is it's how you set it up. The most frequent is what you would call just kind of a standard change in control type of bonus structure where you grant this employee some percentage of the value of the business and it pays if and only if they're employed at the time of sale. Doesn't matter when they leave, why they leave. It's forfeit if they leave prior to a sale. It's not the only way it can be set up. And if it is set up such that the employee has earned it, if they've vested, meaning they've earned it through time, they've earned it through performance, or a combination of those two things, then usually the contract is structured that if they leave on good terms, they're paid out that value at that time. But if they leave for cause, then it is forfeit. And that would be governed by the contract itself.
That's what I kind of figured. Okay, so let's talk. That's interesting, and I get it, and it's so let's talk about the why, right? So the employee doesn't. I mean, obviously they're not going to say no to it, right? So this is kind of slick. But what does it do for them? What instantly, an employee gets this piece of paper that says you own stock in ABC company or whatever, not stock or whatever it's called, alternative equity, right?
All tech.
Um, well, how does it? What's the human emotion that goes along with that?
It's been surprising. So we've done last year. I did a lot of we call them employee rollouts. It's part of our process where we'll help introduce the program to the employees that are getting granted these incentives when we were finished designing the plan. And I did a lot in person last year, just so I could learn and provide extra value for our customers. And we've seen tears, we've seen everything. We've seen people who communicate with their significant others like, wow, I've got a career now. I can't believe what the individual who I'm working for has done and to make this real. So I think that's part of the magic is instead of it just being a piece of paper that historically was, well, look, if you put yourself in the shoes of the employee, it's like I'm an owner. I go into a dark room with a fancy attorney. I draft this thing up, and then I give you, Mr. Employee, this. Hey, you want this incentive? Like it just feels very one sided. Where one of the benefits that we've learned just as a byproduct of doing this is REINS is kind of this unbiased middle party that is there working for both parties. And yes, we make it accessible and easy for the owner, but we make it real and govern it for the employees. And so the fact that it's not just a piece of paper, they can look down at their phone and they can see, here's what I've got, here's what I can do, and here's what it's worth. It makes it real. Yeah, we've seen just incredible, incredible reactions. And then after that, there's the intrinsic value, then there's the quantitative value. What we've seen is 93% retention rate of employees who've been granted an incentive through our platform. We see an average of 15 to 20% EBITDA lift and or valuation lift 12 months after rolling out a program. So teams are they start acting more like owners. And like we just did an employee rollout a couple of months ago where I was there in person, and we were still talking to the owner. We haven't left the building. And he said he received a message from one of the employees who had been granted an incentive, and they started asking him about ways that they could improve efficiency and profitability. Hey, I don't think we should be spending money here. And we hadn't even left the building. So it does make it
Well,
real.
yeah, I think what it does also for the employees, it's totally different than getting a bonus or something, because with this, there's the expectation of so much more. Man, man, we could do this and this and this, and
Yeah.
this just keeps growing.
Skin in the game.
So
Totally different.
yeah,
Without
yeah.
any real
Yep.
risk.
Yep.
The part that, so maybe what that was, I didn't read the text that you're just talking about, but did it say, why are you buying them a black car service when you can just get an Uber for $30 for the REINS company? Was that
Yeah.
what the text said? Save us some money, right? Just kidding.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Send them to the
Yeah.
airport.
Yeah. Why are you going skiing on on a Thursday and putting it
Right.
on the company card?
Well, there is that. So that, all right. So you get people engaged. Automatic, how do you, that's sometimes the tricky part, right? So how do you measure some of this stuff, right? So retention sometimes can be, would they have stayed without it? I don't know, right?
Sure. For
Yep.
sure.
The employee, the lift in EBITDA, who knows, right? So there, you would like to think so, and you would think I'm a big human nature guy, right? So I know I would feel differently, right? So from a tax consequence for the employee, right? You mentioned it a couple times, but one of the things too is if something is just given to you, the taxes on it are treated very differently than if you invest.
Correct.
So how is that set up? Right. So
Correct.
Jim,
So
just if you haven't done this before, so let's just say I gave you 20% equity, right? And you didn't do anything except get the certificate of, and then I sold the company, you would get hammered with taxes as basically as payroll, as your regular W-2, right? So how do y'all do it differently for this?
correct. So one correction, actually, if you handed Jim real equity like securities, Jim would actually have to pay tax on it because it's seen as income. And then once he has basis, then he pays capital gains on
From that
that
point.
equity.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Um,
but either way, it's too
but
much.
yes, yeah. So with alternative equity, basically you get a tax deferral if certain conditions are true. So it's governed under this corner of the tax code called 419A, and it was put into place after the whole Enron fiasco so that executives couldn't just accelerate bonuses willy-nilly. And as long as it fits this compliance requirement, you get a tax deferral. Because the challenge, actually, in my opinion, and in the opinion of our customers, is not the tax rate. It's that when you give Jim the 20%, he has to pay for it in one way, shape, or form. He's either paying for it or he's paying tax on it. Well, the average employee in the small independent businesses of this country, that's not a benefit to them. They're not going to pay for it, right? And so that's historically why it's been a non-starter. So if you structure it correctly, you get a tax deferral. They don't pay for it and they don't pay tax on it. You're correct, Troy, though, that when it actually turns into cash, it's ordinary income. What we have found is that difference in capital gains and ordinary income treatment doesn't matter for 99% of the population. It's a bird in the hand. They wouldn't have otherwise received it. And if it does matter, then there are other structures. There are traditional equity structures that you may want to give your president, your right hand that you would structure. But that individual is in a completely different, life circumstance to be able to pay for it, pay the tax on
Because you
it,
couldn't just say,
what
all
have
right,
you.
give me $100 and then I'll give you 10% of the company, right? There's parameters that it all has to work.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, okay. So that's interesting. So all right. So you got the measuring stick, which is, all those kinds of things. You get them excited, you get them on board. Everybody's crying, right? So, and now, which is the goal. And then you
Yeah.
go skiing. And then what happens after that? So do you, do you manage it for them? Are you keeping track of valuations? Are they sharing their quarterly income statements, all that kind of stuff? Or how do you normally operate?
Yeah. So we manage it for them. We help train them, both the owners and the employees. Part of it is just compliance, like in administering the actual incentive plan. Part of it, like you pointed out, is, well, at least on an annual basis, let's do another valuation. And we've made that very affordable, very accessible within our programs. So then the employees can see, oh, wow, it's growing. And look, in the event that it's not, explain to them why, right? It gives an opportunity for good owners, good operators to discuss these financial things in their business. A lot of the businesses we work with too, they'll have existing bonus programs. So to sort of formalize it and make it no entitlement, purely um, a mechanism for incentivizing behavioral change. Now, employees on a regular basis, whether we connect to their QuickBooks or whether someone on their team is just inputting the high level company metrics, they can see, oh, well, we're 8%, and we need to be at 10% net profit. But if we're 10%, I'm going to get that bonus. And by the way, to Jim's point, it's uncapped. It's uncapped. The best incentive programs are ones that incentivize teams to keep running. They're not like sort of these parasitic bonus programs where it's like, I'm going to get $500 if this thing is true. And that's it. Like, it actually doesn't incentivize the right behavior. There's a cap, like and it's just an entitlement ultimately at the end of the day. And so REINS makes it into a living, breathing um, growth engine for your company, because they see in real time how close they are to the business goals and the things that they can control that ultimately help the business. But again, answer that question, what's in it for me?
Yeah. Is it something that is it that needs to be audited, like officially, or no?
It doesn't need to be audited. Nope.
Okay. So that makes it simpler too, right? The business owner who writes off his skiing vacation can keep doing it as long as he was doing it before, right?
Well, and one of the
I'm
things,
just kidding, but you know what I mean?
yeah, well, but it's actually a really good point. So when you value a business, one of the things you're going to want to do is you're going to want to add back any owner benefits. And a lot of people, even sort of the valuation class out there, they don't do that. And you absolutely can. And so that is never, if done correctly, going to flow down to the bottom line. It's never going to affect employees, because any reasonable buyer is going to say, those things are going to go away when I buy the business. And so you're going to materially value it on the assumption that those things don't exist.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of different things that, that are perfectly legal and reasonable
Yeah.
that people
Yeah.
do to run their
Yeah.
business, in different ways. So what is somebody, all right. So how about, I don't want to put you on the spot with this, but how does somebody reaches out to you? How's your cost structure? How's that kind of at a high level? Is that something you can share or give us some
Yeah.
insight of? Okay.
Yeah, it depends on kind of size and stature of the business, what you're trying to accomplish, but it's anything from a couple $100 a month, no setup fee for a very, very simple structure, to, the most complicated people who want us embedded, designing all the plans for them, fully managing the program. Could be several $1,000s to set up, and eight. $800, $1,000 a month in terms of management fees. So there's a wide sort of range, but a lot of people start few $100 a month. They get all their key employees on a retention incentive. with all the tools to make it real. And most of our plans will include evaluation if it's required for the plan. It's not always required.
Yeah. That's a heck of a lot less expensive than I thought you were going to say. So,
Yeah. Well, the average comp and ben attorney is going to charge, $30,000 for a program like this. And what people don't understand is they actually don't do the design. Like they draft the contracts. We feel like that's the easy part. You get the contracts, force contracts, with our platform. And if you want to draw outside the lines, you get your attorney to redline it. But generally, it's good for 95% of use cases. The real challenge, and you said it, your first question was, well, how much do I give? And what is it based upon? Those are the questions we actually are uniquely suited to answer. And that is the stuff that we help with that really you'd have to get another consultant to come in and do. So by the time you get the consultant, the comp and ben attorney, and do evaluation, you could be looking at 30, 40, $50,000.
yeah, well, that's kind of what I thought you were going to say. So that's crazy. Which is another reason why people don't even really kick the tire on it. They think about it, but they
Correct.
don't even look at it because they're like,
Correct.
attorney won't even talk to me for less than $1,000, right? So,
Right.
interesting. So
That's good info though for the people that tune in, because to know that they have an opportunity to do something like this for very economically, they don't have to. So that's kind of cool.
So what would you say that if a business owner is kind of, you spurred some thoughts, right? So what are the purely business incentive? What are the top 3 or 5 things that would be the reason they should consider it?
Yeah. Yeah. So you're going to improve key employee retention for sure. At the very least, if you thought about it, it's probably because there's 2, 3 employees who you're thinking of. You've probably already had the conversation. There's probably a back the napkin or a handshake agreement in place. And you think it's real, but they don't think it's real. And so even just creating that trust factor, like Jim had mentioned with them, is worth the price of admission. But we've become very much a growth lever in these businesses because once you layer on the other incentives and you say, well, if we hit this goal, if you do X, Y, and Z behavior, you get a piece of that action, you get a benefit in the upside. We've seen a lot much alignment of those goals and the outcomes for both parties. And then for folks that are thinking about selling their business, taking a step back, planning for succession 3 to 5 years out even. It starts to put things in motion where you're reducing your owner dependency. You, at the very least, maybe can go skiing with your son, on a Tuesday. But at the very best, you're going to start creating a business where the team grows it like you do and you can step away from. And that's going to make a business more valuable, whether you want to sell it or whether you just want to live through the profits. You need to create that redundancy. And so those are sort of the reasons why folks would explore something like this.
You're giving people some leadership levers or feeling like they
Yeah.
have some,
Yeah.
like I said, skin in the game. Do you think most of them, what do you advise most of them to at least to share like a monthly P&L or a quarterly P&L with everybody? What's a good routine?
That's a good question. So we recently partnered with a firm by the name of ProfitWorks, founded by a gentleman by the name of Alex Freytag, who's a very high level EOS implementer. If you're familiar with that operating system, and we basically integrated their expertise into our process. And one of the things they talk about a lot is like this financial acumen, and the most successful operators, both ProfitWorks and REINS have seen in the wild, are the ones that are more transparent. That doesn't mean you necessarily have to share the full P&L, but if you're talking about the high level numbers and you're kind of giving the why, a lot of operators I've seen that are right on the precipice are like screaming into the wind about this is the goal we need to hit, but they don't explain why, and they don't actually explain how profit works. That's another thing that ProfitWorks, aptly named, does a really good job at, is explaining the teams. Like they run these exercises where it's like if you ask the average employee how much they think an owner takes home on every dollar that comes through the door, you would be floored. And so these are some of the exercises that our combined expertise shares. But just to kind of share what the best operators do is they're more transparent than not.
Yeah, it's amazing what they don't know, right? Everybody thinks, well, you're the owner, so you're automatically, super rich, right? So, and you charge $400 for me to go change this that costs $20, right? You must be
Hmm.
super rich, right? So
Hmm.
it's all of that.
Hmm.
Um, what would you so a little bit so in that though, so you've talked to hundreds of business owners in the trade space, right? So, um, what do you when you look at the bottom line, so there's an average bottom line that I've kind of preached to for business owners in the home services particularly, that they're only after all of it, they're only making 1 or 2% profit, right? And most people just don't understand how in the world can they charge that much and not make any money,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So do you see the same thing? And then this is another, even though they're not making any money and they're like, I can't afford to do that. In some ways, they almost can't afford not to.
Not to do it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we see all too often, unfortunately, businesses with less than a 5% net margin. Interestingly, kind of as a carrot in and of itself, above 10 and once you hit that 15 mark, that's like the sweet spot of where you're going to get a much better EBITDA multiple when you do get your business valued. And ultimately, that's what a willing buyer would look at. And so you're right. It's when you put together an incentive plan structured the right way, what you can do is you can say, well, our trigger is 10%. Anything over and above that, we'll share some portion of it with the team, uncapped. Now, the key is like, well, explain to the team what creates that efficiency, right? Is it, in the home services space, for example, is it, on the technician side, reducing callbacks, reducing those trips to Home Depot when we should have had the stock at the shop,
Right. Right.
it's all of these things that it's probably out of sight, out of mind for the average employee. And if you put dollars and cents in their pocket and incentivize them to change that behavior, then it's a win-win.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. All right. So let's do this. Jim, let's one more question for Mr. Chris and we'll let him go sell some stuff.
Well, first of all, thanks for being here. This has been very interesting,
Yeah, my
and
pleasure.
we appreciate it. And we have a question that we like to ask all of the guests, just to kind of get a baseline of where you're really at. And being from Canada, I think this is going to be very interesting. So we like to ask everybody, what is your favorite tool? So like
Mm,
I like channel locks. I think channel locks are a great tool. What is your favorite tool?
like like
Sure.
tool.
Yeah.
If
Yes.
you're naked and afraid, what would be the tool you'd bring with? I
There
guess.
you go. There you go.
That's interesting. Well, I recently built a sauna in my garage, and I
Wow.
bought my first
Don't you live in Las Vegas? Did you really need it?
yes.
Yeah.
It
Well,
is a sauna. What?
it was a winter thought. Now, I
Oh,
mean,
okay.
a
All right.
lot less energy to heat it in the summer for sure. But I bought a nail gun for the first time. I was planning on doing this thing by hand. And I'm like, it
Right.
changed my life. So I'd have to say that.
Very good. Very
Do me
good.
a favor though.
Yeah.
Next time you use it and you're that you blow it off like it's a
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Of
like a
course,
44.
of
Get
course.
a holster. Get a holster for
Yeah,
it.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
That'll
Exactly.
impress your neighbors.
That's right.
All right. So this has been awesome. I mean, I think you got my wheels spinning. So this is good stuff. So any last bit of advice you'd want to give to business owners and one last pitch that you want to kind of for your business?
And how to get a hold of you.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we've got a lot of free resources on our website, myreins.com, myreins.com. We actually wrote a book last year called Alternative Equity.
Saw that
We
pop
try
up when I
and
was
give
on
it
your
a,
website.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We try and give it away for free. So go to the website and grab a copy. It's completely non-promotional. It's a guide that just is the goal of sort of democratizing access to this information for the average independent business owner. And I would say kind of something similar, which is REINS is not the only way to create an incentive program. And I just encourage folks to look into these sorts of things, get away from the entitlement Christmas bonus, go toward the performance-based incentive structure, and educate yourself on tools that can level the playing field. You know, as the independent business owner that I'm sure a lot of your listeners are, historically they've had to battle against private equity and these big corporations. And if you look a little deeper, you'll see that we're building tools so that you can compete, and that's our mission.
There you go.
Nice.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Okay. All right. Well, very good. Well, thank you again. We couldn't appreciate it enough for your time, and we will be reaching out to you soon. So thank you again. Thanks,
My
Chris.
pleasure.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, guys.
And